Welcome to What the Frac. We are your fractional team, and today we break down marketing trends, strategies, and tactics in 30 minutes or less so that you can do the fun stuff like be creative.
Tamra, how are you?
Well, I am very excited about our live today because we are diving in to not only copywriting and content, but we're focusing in on the SaaS world, which you know I love.
Oh, yes. And I mean, I think that have you ever worked with a client that wants more conversions, but is not willing to really look at the messaging, or is like, that's not the first thought on their mind?
Yeah. Well, yeah, they're always thinking that it's something else, not the messaging. Usually it's the messaging and the call to action.
So often it's a small tweak. It's good copy, it's authenticity, all the things we talk about on a weekly basis. So I'm really excited because this guest is going to bring all those pieces together. I know we talk about them very individually a lot of times, but today we have, and I'm going to screw up. Everyone knows that I screw up every name. Everyone knows it. Chris Silvestri. There we go. All the way from the UK. He's joining us today. He is the Conversion Alchemist, and his message market fit strategy and copywriting has been crafting high converting messaging for B2B tech brands like Moz since 2016. With a background in software engineering and UX, he brings a rare mix of logic, psychology, and storytelling to every line of copy, which I think is just such a needed combination. So in this episode, we're going to be digging into messaging that actually works in 2025, how AI is shaping up research and writing, and why most SaaS startups are missing the mark by trying to sound smart instead of clear. So are you ready, Tamra?
I love it. Bring him in. Let's talk to Chris.
Hey, hi, Chris. Hey, Nicole. Hey, Tamra. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here.
So where do we even start? I mean, that's such an interesting mix of techniques that you use. So how did you get into copywriting and conversions? Give us a little background.
Yeah, so I'm originally, I live in the UK now, but I'm originally from Italy. So back when I lived in Italy, I was a software engineer, did that for 10 years, and it was in industrial automation. So anything, like when you think software engineering, you think website development, apps, completely different. Imagine robots in factories that assemble components. That was basically what I was programming. And so all of that, but there was also a lot of usability involved because I was designing the human-machine interfaces, so displays that operators used on these machines. So a lot of putting myself in other people's shoes, and so that helped a lot. But at the same time, I kind of hated there was some friction in kind of the job that I was doing because I also had a band. I'm a drummer, and so I wanted to tour more with my band, and got sick of having to ask for a vacation 3 months in advance. So I decided, let's look for how to make money online. So I tried different things, and I ended up stumbling on copywriting. I was instantly hooked by the psychology behind it, the decision-making aspect, everything that you need to understand before even writing a single word. And so started doing that on the side. And finally, when I moved to the UK in 2018, I went full-time, did that. And then I also became a UX designer because I worked with an agency for a couple of years, learned other stuff, usability testing, and when in 2021 I started Conversion Alchemy, which is my current business, I basically tried to combine everything in kind of my process, my methodology, and the way that I think about this stuff. And so this brings me pretty much to today and what I do.
That's amazing.
Yeah, and you brought up kind of exactly where I wanted to start is how do you think differently about writing content and copy for B2B SaaS companies? Because they're a really unique space.
Yeah, so the first big difference, I think, with B2B, especially B2B, I'm business to business SaaS as well. There's a lot of complex dynamics in decision-making processes, right? You have a lot of different decision makers, stakeholders, and everyone has got their own mental models, ways to think, or motivations that bring them to your page or to your emails or whatever asset. And so the first thing that you need to understand that all the companies, I think, mess up is, rather than telling them what you do right away, what you need to actually do is match the conversation that you already have in their minds when they land on a website, right? So imagine they land on your homepage, they already have certain criteria they're looking for in a product like yours, or already other solutions that they've tried or evaluating at the same time. So you have to be able to differentiate yourselves by matching what brings them to the page. And that's probably the biggest differentiator. The other one, I also think a lot of even copywriters or companies that try and write their own messaging, they think about messaging or copy mostly just like the words they write on a page, right? But the way that I think about that is also messaging as kind of infrastructure architecture. So anything that builds your messaging infrastructure is all the strategy, all the copy, and that makes up basically the way that you move your audience through your assets, through your marketing, through your funnel. So it's not only simple words, but it's basically an architecture that touches every touch point for your customers, right? So you have to think about the user experience through the funnel, through the journey for all your users, and even different stakeholders, right? So different times, different touch points. So I think these are the main differentiators of like the way that I think about this.
One of the things, Tamara, that I love about what Chris is saying here is that we talk about we're fractionals. We have a lot of people out there who are talking about the fractional work. And I don't want to say anything. I use specialized creative people because they are the experts in what they do. But one of the things that I've come across in working with brands, working as a marketing agency, working as a founder, all these pieces, and the reason that I think my clients gravitate towards what I do as a fractional is that you can have someone who is an amazing copywriter. They can even be an amazing SEO copywriter. They can even be an amazing, wordsmith and editor and all these things. But if you don't have someone who's thinking about copywriting through the funnel, through conversion, through all of these other pieces, you could still end up with amazing storytelling that doesn't actually convert. And at the end of the day, founders or, C-level executives or the board, at the end of the day, they want to see conversions. That's the end. That's the game that we're playing, right? So what I like what you're doing, Chris, is that you're almost coming in as a fractional here. We're not just talking about copywriting. We're talking about the full funnel from beginning to end.
Yeah, I actually started when I first started Conversion Alchemy was much more of the actual copy implementation. So I was basically doing the same research pretty much, and then copy and wireframing. So the UX of copy was still applied, but I wasn't already doing the strategy that came before that, right? So, and then I started seeing a lot of my clients when we started working, they didn't really have a clear idea of what made them different, who they were building the product for, and how to message that as well. And so I basically decided to just include that because I realized that all of my projects were basically ended up in them having to redesign and relaunch the website along with my copy. So why not give them the ammo to do that well?
Well, you just mentioned too, what is so important with SaaS particularly is there are so many stakeholders that have to buy off in order to pay for a platform, right? A lot of these B2Bs, some are less expensive, but some at enterprise level are incredibly expensive. And so you have to have not only the people who are going to use it, but then you have to have people who aren't going to use it buy in to pay for the product. And so they have to easily understand why this product is going to serve the company and all the multiple players involved. So you're not writing for one person, you're writing for sometimes 5 people to understand why this product is necessary to use for your company, which can be such a challenge to weave that in because you only have so much space on your website, right? It's not like you're making a case study for every single stakeholder. You have to weave this complex story into one small location. It's no easy feat.
The rise of buying committees, Tamara, we were just talking about this. Like sales is no longer sales to one person, sales to the CEO. It's the buying committees.
So typically when it comes to kind of understanding or segmenting our ICPs, what I do is divide them into the check signers. So who pays, who's the manager, who's the influencer, and who's the daily user. So these are typically the 4 ones. And then for each one, there we might have different roles as well, right? So, but I try to keep them usually these 4 or 5 personas maximum, because I don't like hyper complexity, and it's still hard to write even for like 4 or 5 people, right? So but it's totally true, and that's also where I think the user experience of copy, so how you consume and let your visitors digest your copy on a website, for example, that also where it plays out, because when a lot of these different people land on your website, what matters is also where they start from, what's the next step, what are those micro decisions that they need to take. So for me, we are not really selling a product. We're not selling one call to action, which can be book a demo or sign up, right? We are selling all the micro decisions that need to happen on a website. So for example, on the landing page, home page, we have the hero section, right? So there's a headline, typically subhead, and call to action. That's already a set of micro decisions. They need to decide to read the first headline, then the subhead, and then maybe either click on there or hover on the navigation and move to another page. So there's already a lot of different micro decisions that they need to take, and you need to account for all of different personas at the same time, especially on the homepage. Obviously, as you move further down the funnel, that becomes more specific, and you can have use case pages, persona pages, solutions pages. So it's all a matter of starting as broader as you can, but as compelling as you can, and then as focused as you can.
What I'm going to say is going to sound really dumb or simple, but I just had this moment, and I've been working in web for a really long time here, Chris, and something you just said just like had this epiphany moment where it's like, now that we have these buying committees, they are going to consume that website. We already know they consume media differently. We already know that some consume podcasts, some consume blogs, some consume, like, we all know they consume media differently, but they're actually going to consume your website differently, because the person coming in who's just in finance and just trying to figure out what the cost and the ROI is, and the person coming in who is going to be the daily user, and the person who's coming in from the C-suite is going to look at 3 different pages on your website, and maybe one comes into the blog, one comes into the pricing page and the product page, and one comes into like the features or the demo, right? So they're going to consume your website differently. And so how do you, making sure that you have that UX thought process in there is so important. And I never have had the copywriter and the UX person work together, but I feel like now that's going to have to be the case.
Yeah. So a big part of what I do is also, again, the UX kind of research. So I try to look at as many user recordings, for example, or heat maps or click maps that I can from platforms like Hotjar or Clarity, which is free, even better. And so, and kind of map out all of those different flows, right? Where do people move? Where do they land the most? What's the next 1 or 2 or 3 pages that they visit? And try to see, okay, these are the top 4 or 5 flows, and we should optimize for these, and then messaging should set and match expectations at every point. But and I will also, you mentioned these different people have different ways of consuming and visiting pages. I would also add that now with AI, if we want to get into AI, there's another extra person which is not even human, because now you have agents visiting websites. So you have to also account for how do these agents, there's already like procurement department, they use agentic platforms to visit websites and to make decisions for them. So how do you plan for like an AI visiting your website? Obviously, it's probably going to be more about facts, a bit less about emotion. So you have to account for human and AI now, which is even more of a mess.
Yeah. Tamara always wants to bring AI into it, so let's bring that conversation there.
Yeah, I'll talk about that. I mean, well, now I was derailed from the question that I was going to ask because no, well, I mean, I was thinking before we started to bring AI in, your thought process and how you go about researching what you need to put into your messaging is obviously incredibly important and also changing. How do you go about your research process for this, now taking into account that it is AI and it is all these different stakeholders who are coming in and going to these pages?
Yeah, so the research process like didn't really change much, except maybe I'm doing a couple of extra steps. But the way that I plan my research and I try to always create a system, research system for my clients, so that they can also repeat it and maintain it once I'm gone. But I basically see research as an iceberg. So there's the first layer outside of the water, which is kind of the surface layer. And that's basically everything that your audience is saying. So anything that you typically already have available, which could be public reviews for your product or competitors, could be sales conversations, sales transcripts that you have from your sales calls, could be product analytics if you already have them, support chat transcripts. So everything that you already have available where you can actually see how your audience speaks, what kind of language they use. Then the next step, which we're going underwater in the iceberg, is the UX and kind of structural layer, which is again what I mentioned about using heat maps, looking at user interactions, so all of the more behavioral and the behavioral data that tells you how users act on a website, or even when they look at your emails or sales texts. And the final layer is more of the deeper and qualitative layer, which is anything about understanding why users make those decisions and accomplish those actions, which is all about interviewing customers, jobs to be done, interviews, deconstructing competitors, not copying them, obviously, but deconstructing their strategy and understanding what type of users they are targeting and so on. So all of that to really try to understand the decision-making process of your audience. And for each of those three layers, I always like to subdivide them into three areas, which is the internal one. So typically interviewing the team of my client's team, so support, sales, marketing, the founder, product, to understand the internal vision and the point of view. Then the external research, which is understanding the prospect side and customer side, so that we can map out the transformation. And finally, the market side, which is competitors, so looking at those reviews. So with these three facets and that kind of iceberg structure, which is kind of linear, I build this kind of research system that allows me to create a structure around understanding all the different aspects that we need to write about. And probably now for those agents, another thing that I'm starting to add is also trying to use all the different LLMs and have them look at the website, right, the current website, and see what kind of results they give me. So I might use ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Google Gemini, all of those, and see what kind of results, what kind of messaging they give me, which is basically what comes up for like an LLM or an agent. And it's pretty useful to see what kind of angles come up with your positioning or kind of messaging pillars it detects. So yeah, it's probably something that I'm going to start doing more and more now.
Now, Nicole, I've got to jump in one more time because since my brain went in a different direction with that last question, I want to also ask what I was going to ask before is, one of the important things, obviously, with marketing is A/B testing and making sure that you're getting your copy right or your assumptions right. And sometimes I feel like with copywriting, with whatever messaging that you create, sometimes you create it and you're like, done, put it on the website, we'll come audit it in 6 months, right? But that shouldn't be the case. How do you create a system or a plan for how you're going to ensure that the copy that you created that's on there really is resonating and doing what you hope for those conversions?
Yeah, so This is actually something that happened in a recent project that I just wrapped up. And so this was a tech company that got acquired by private equity. So we were working both with private equity side and the company. So there was constant change, kind of alignment between the private equity firm and the company. And we also wanted to make sure that when we relaunched the website, everything was at least of like a very good 90% validation point. And so what we did was even at the kind of when we had positioning done, messaging strategy, but none of the actual copy of like official pages done yet, we still had some value propositions, right? We have a value proposition canvas, which is basically for every persona. We go into their pains, the implication of their pains, the solutions, the benefits, the jobs to be done, and examples of copy that we might expand and turn into different variants. So we use some of those value propositions to already validate on the current website. So even like before relaunching or redesigning anything, we start validating those. And the go-to-market team sent some traffic on the website just to see the reaction. And we were able to see, okay, these angles work a bit better. This is the direction we should go. And then we expanded on those. The other thing that we started doing as well before launching the website was also testing some of the messaging on the sales decks and sales collaterals with the sales team. So the sales team, we created kind of a V1 MVP version of the decks for different personas as well. And the sales team started using them, told us, like, gave us feedback. Okay, this works, this doesn't work. We see friction here, we see some objections. And that was super helpful to then shape the final messaging when we actually launched it, right? Another probably unused technique that I'm started doing lately is to use synthetic research, which basically means using AI to create AI personas that you can actually test copy with. And that's super cheap, super fast, not super accurate, but still, if you want to make sure they're at least in the right direction before launching, I think it's really valuable.
Yeah, I think that working with web clients or with businesses doing web redesigns, branding redesigns and stuff like that, one of the things that I see is that messaging and copy piece tends to get like pushed to the end. And so then it becomes this like rush of like, oh, we need the messaging, and you're the marketer, you should know exactly what to say in this space. And I think more and more that we talk to copywriters, more and more that we talk to you here, Chris, it seems that if you own a business and you're looking to build your website, you're looking to build your sales decks, you're looking to do anything where you are talking to a customer, maybe take a little bit more time and start bringing the copywriters and the people who are building the messaging in a little bit earlier in the process, so that you're not basically being stuck with whatever comes out of, of one brainstorm, and then that's your messaging you have to kind of live with, right? And that's just a little like bit that I want to stand on. But with that being said, my question, I want to bring up the thing that I think everyone's waiting for, which is clearly you are all about conversions for SaaS companies. So if I own a SaaS company and maybe I'm happy with my messaging, maybe I'm not, I'm launched, I'm getting some, orders in, I'm getting users, but I'm not seeing the conversion rate I want to see. Where do I start? How do I even start thinking through bringing in more conversions?
So we talked about like the three main areas, right? Positioning, messaging, and copy. So the first thing that I would do would be to understand where your messaging is breaking. Is it the positioning, meaning are you clear on what you do, who you do it for, and how uniquely, better, or differently? That's the first thing. If yes, go to the next step, which is the messaging. Are you saying it the right way? Which means, are you using some of the language that your audience uses at the right awareness and sophistications, which means you know what they know about the problem, solution, space, and you also know how much they know and what kind of language they use. But also for messaging, I would also add, do you have a strong point of view? Which means, do you have a specific, unique insight on what the market is doing and how you solve those problems specifically, that you like, what's the reason that you actually built your product for. That should be kind of the hook, the anchor in your whole messaging that shapes the conversation, especially sales conversations that you have, because then you're able to say, we saw this in the market. You might have tried solving it in these other different ways, right? This is how we do it, because it basically matches the reason why we build this product, right? So you basically create that kind of loop in between the insight that you have and the reason you built your product. So once you're clear on the what, you're clear on the how you're saying it, then look at your copy now. Are you using the right words? Are you creating the right journeys, the right flows with your copy? Are you mapping out and covering all of those messaging pillars that you defined? So first, I would urge a founder to kind of diagnose their current state and find out where everything is kind of breaking. And then it's probably going to be a matter of going back to research and trying to find that out.
Tamara, I don't know about you, but I feel like a lot of founders are the questions that Chris just asked are so spot on, but also a lot of founders would just be like, yes, we have that. What are you talking about? Like, we were already there. So like, they're not very self-aware sometimes about what's actually broken in that. So, I mean, this is where working with a fractional, working with someone like Chris, will allow you to like kind of look in the mirror a little bit and find. But is there like, have you seen, Tamara, like KPIs or a certain way to like look at data that shows that something subjective like messaging is not connecting?
I was just going to say, messaging is so subjective that when you look at your funnel and you're like, where is something breaking? And you're like, oh, well, the conversions are stopping on our homepage, but you're not quite sure if it's a function of UX UI or if it's messaging, right? So with messaging, I think that's where it comes down to the human touch, and the data is hard. You have to collect it from, I would say, things like you said, like sales calls, right? Because you can clearly do two different types of messages to people, and it's not technology, right? So if you have the same awesome salesperson giving the two different messages and one converts and one doesn't, then you can see it. But if you're just looking on the page, then you would have to look at something, and Chris, jump in here. You would have to look at like how people interact on the page. So if you can tell that their cursor stops over something and then you lose them, then that's clearly a messaging issue, right? Because if they're clicking through a few pages, then they're understanding the concept, and maybe it's the pricing that's getting them, or there's something else. But if their cursor is going over and then things stop and you lose them, then they haven't understood the concept.
Yeah, totally. And that's why it's important again to look at those user interaction data, but also running usability tests, which is probably a bit harder for B2B because you have to find kind of an audience that's close. So there are some platforms like Winter is a messaging platform that's typically used, or Synthetic Research again is another resource that's becoming useful, especially in B2B because it's hard to find those participants. But yeah, totally agree. You have to kind of look at both sides, the behavioral and the kind of understanding messaging and deconstruction of that.
Yeah, and we use KPIs, obviously, like the conversion, right? The conversion rate, the sales rate, like all of that. But then there's also KPAs. So like, being able to see that there's always trends towards something. And so they may not seem like a lot. Like, do they, on the homepage, is there a spot where there's more resources, and are they actually clicking into those resources, right? And spending time on them, because that means they're maybe interested, but they're in the research portion of their funnel, right? Or is the messaging pulling them in a certain way? Which ones are they clicking on? Things like how long they spend on the page, how many times do they come back? Do they fill out a form or take a quiz, right? There's lots of ways that you can show before you even get to conversion that something is either working or not. And so I just challenge our viewers to think through the entire funnel, not just as pure conversions, but the KPAs that are kind of leading you to, okay, if I put this data together, this is the trend I'm seeing.
Mm. A couple of things that I might try to do, depending on the traffic, obviously. But like, for example, launching website polls, like those mini pop-up surveys, especially after someone signs up, or on the pricing page where you ask them what brings you to the site today, or was there anything that might prevent you from signing up today? So all those things that you launch at the moment when like they might be useful could also give you some good data, or like thank you surveys. So once someone signs up, asking them one simple questions like, now that you signed up for this tool, what are you going to do? It gives you like ideas on maybe the value proposition. So all of those. Or maybe in interviews, I always try to, not always possible, but try to interview fresh customers. So 6 months old maximum, hopefully fresher customers, and ask them questions about their journey. But again, that's not super reliable, right? You might ask them like, how did you go about like looking at the website? But obviously their memory might not be super accurate. So you can't rely only on that.
Well, one thing I forgot too that we've talked about before, Nicole, is chatbots now, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have someone on your site who's asking a lot of questions, then obviously your copy probably is not doing the job that it's supposed to be doing. If you're not being clear, someone needs to ask a lot of questions, then you need to figure out how to be more clear. But
and you should take the answers or like those questions and try to inject those topics or objections into your copy, so the copy does the work for you.
Yeah. And I think we talk a lot about like SEO, like, content strategy and people putting blogs on their website just for keywords. But you also have to remember, like, if you want to shorten your sales cycle, you need to be able to answer the questions that everybody at all buying points and buying committee have. So if you can answer them before they even get, nowadays people don't want to pick up the phone. They don't want to talk to someone, right? There's a lot of research around how far they have to be in the sales cycle before they even communicate with someone. And so the more opportunities you have to build content that would help, solidify that, when you're thinking about your content strategy, pieces of content don't have to do everything. It doesn't have to be an SEO and a client facing, sales facing, whatnot. Make sure you have that success metric. What is this piece of content trying to alleviate? If your sales team is saying every time we get on the phone, they have the same question, maybe that's time to bring that information in. And the last piece I'll bring to that is, like, I know this is going more to the UX side, but if you're talking about conversions, we're talking about the words that are being said on pages, but also there is messaging in the colors and the imagery and the stuff that is happening on the page. And it's not uncommon to see that something as simple as changing the color of a button, or where that add to cart button is on the page, or where that checkout button is, or what the actual wording on it says, it can change how someone feels about your brand. So yes, we're talking about the copywriting, but don't forget that the imagery and how someone feels on that page, and the color psychology that comes to what buttons bring, and what, if everything on your page is red, people aren't going to feel so good about it, right? So remember that piece of messaging as well.
Yeah, totally. One thing that I like to do when I look at competitors, especially, is to categorize the colors that they use and kind of decipher the emotional triggers from those colors. And so I have a map and kind of a side-by-side comparison of all the emotional triggers and kind of the different colors and what they evoke and what kind of messaging those match with. And so that with my clients, we can actually try and maybe differentiate or do a better job of that.
I love that.
I love how with pop, like the emotional, talking about the emotional triggers and the psychology and all of that. It's so important. And so often we just try and like get something out there, right?
That's why when people say, like, why is branding so expensive? Like, you have someone who's thinking about your colors and how the emotional response people have to it. Like, people don't know you're not supposed to paint your kitchen yellow, because it causes more fights if you're like in a relationship with someone, right? There's certain colors that well, there's certain colors that like are illegal for sports teams to paint the visiting team's locker room because it causes them to either be more calm or like not to be as aggressive in the game or competitive, right? Like there's just lots of psychology, and if you don't understand it, get someone who understands it. If you're doing branding, you're doing UX, you're doing these things because there's an emotional response.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you one thing, especially when you mention like people don't like to get on calls anymore, right? So what do you think about interactive demos? Because there's like contrasting opinions that I see, like basically those kind of interactive demos that people can use literally without signing up, without doing anything.
I think they're
great. I think that you need to once again have the strategy, right? So it's kind of that mentality that goes back through marketing for ages and ages, which is like that like drug dealer mentality is what I call it, where you give them a little taste, right? You probably shouldn't be giving away your whole product right up front, but if you can give them enough that it answers their questions, they want a little bit more and they want to talk to the sales team now, or they want to buy, I think it's a great option. Because like you said, people, like we've been talking about, people are a little bit hesitant. It takes more touch points to get them on the phone. It takes more touch points for them to buy. It takes more touch points for them to interact with your brand. And it also comes down to the industry, who's in the buying committee, all of those pieces. But there's a lot of research to making sure your strategy is giving enough away for them to be excited and then getting them on the phone call. The same thing with the AI bots. They're the same, the chat bots. They're the same way. You have to give them enough to answer, but make them excited to want to talk to you still.
Yeah, I love the drug lord mentality.
Pay for something before you use it, especially when it's a SaaS platform, is such a barrier in your customer acquisition process for SaaS companies. Because what we know is that usually something that a company's buying is going to be hard to set up, right? They're going to need to understand how it interacts with a bunch of different portions of their company. And so if they can't see that, and if they can't interact with it, then the likelihood of them buying in is going to be very low. What we do know though, is that the longer period of a like freemium model, the harder it is to convert. So there's a sweet spot with your either interactive or your freemium model, which is like usually 2 to 3 days of converting. But if you allow it to go much longer, then, statistics show a decline.
And it depends on the level of pricing, right? Because if we're talking about like a $10.99, if we're talking about like a $10 a month product, then we probably don't need all those extra pieces because they can just jump on, do the freemium model, get it right there. But if we're talking about something like Marketo that's like $14,000 just to have the license and it's gonna be really hard to use, we may want to do some demos, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, Chris, this has been an amazing conversation. How can people follow you and get in touch with you?
Yeah, so people can find me at conversionalchemy.net, my website, where I have just published a research report on synthetic research, which is meta, but if you want to check it out. And also I'm typically on LinkedIn. So if you want to chat, I regularly try to post and connect with people on interesting things.
That's amazing. Well, we'll be connecting on LinkedIn, but if you guys have not connected with us on LinkedIn, we post lots of new information. Subscribe to our channel, join our newsletter. We have our podcast is anywhere you listen to podcasts. We're on social media. Come join our community of like-minded entrepreneurs who are looking to grow their companies, build their brand, and to think more like a fractional executive in the strategy moment. Tamara?
Yeah, and if you have any questions, DM us. We'd love to hear from you. See everybody next week. Chris, thank you.